Yeah, today I found a really cool video. I'm not sure. I think I found it 3 days ago. Or no, I must have found it yesterday after the stream, because otherwise I would have reacted to it on stream. But I not watched this, so this could be really good or really bad. It has 500,000 views, so hopefully it's a good video. Um, Usually can't go by that. A lot of videos with like millions and millions and millions of views are like absolute garbage. So I don't know if that's the greatest metric. What's up, Fluffy Kitty? Sorry if I kept you waiting. I'm not sure how long you've been here. I had to like do a few things real quick. But yeah, we got a really cool video to go through today, so hopefully it's worth the wait. But yeah, how's everything lately? I feel like things have been pretty hectic. I don't think I like got a chance to ask you what's been going on lately. People are just like losing their minds, so I gotta put them first because you seem pretty stable. But I hope everything's well with you. Thanks for always being here, by the way. I don't think I say that enough, especially the people that are always here, that are always positive and always, saying good things. You guys are the reason why I keep doing this. You guys are the reason why this is so fun to do. Like if this was just like, I don't know, just the other types of streams, like I wouldn't sit down and do this every day. Like I would have got burnt out. That's the reason why I don't do the other types of streams where I'm on my phone because it's just boring after a while. It's not fun. We don't talk about anything. We don't talk about anything interesting. The format doesn't lend to any actual ideas. It's just purely for views, attention, this, that. It's stupid. But yeah, it's not too loud, right?
I remember when I was about 9 years old, learning any subject that came my way eagerly in elementary school. And one day, we took a look at birds. Like many of my classmates, I was shocked to hear how some birds would forcefully push their baby birds out of their nest so they would learn to fly. They would either get the hang of it while falling through the air, or you have to jump on your own. I'm sure it's very comfortable up there, I have no idea. Ralph Waldo Emerson is a short, potentially life-changing pamphlet.
It is not potentially life changing. It is life changing. If you read Self Reliance, your life will never be the same. The way you view society, the way you view yourself, the way you view what living a good life is, will forever be changed. And it truly is one of the only things that I would blindly suggest to every single person. Like, there's a few books that are like, will help absolutely everybody, but they're rarely philosophy. Like the books that I would say can help everybody is like How to Win Friends and Influence People. Like it's a pretty generic book, but it talks about some really important like communication skills. Um, Maybe Think and Grow Rich. Maybe that's another one that will help everyone's mindset, that will help everyone understand that like you're only limited by yourself, you're only limited by your beliefs, you're only limited by the things that you think yourself capable of. I'm sure there's a few that I'm missing, a few books that like are must read for absolutely everybody. I don't care who you are, but Self-Reliance would be the one work of philosophy I think everybody can gain something from. And if you want to know how great Self-Reliance is, if you want to know how great the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson is, even fucking Nietzsche thought Ralph Waldo Emerson was a genius, okay? The biggest hater in the history of intellectuals believed that Ralph Waldo Emerson was among the great, was saying something of worth. Like you understand, one of Nietzsche's most famous works, Beyond Good and Evil, is him destroying every other belief system, him slandering everything. Emerson's the only one who he does not attack. He's the only one that he believed was one of his contemporaries. Like that should show you alone, just because Nietzsche was such a like a, like a bitter person. It seems. I mean, maybe he wasn't. That's what I get from his writing. That's what I get from his life. But yeah,
Emerson introduces the essay with a Latin phrase, "Ne te quisiveris extra," meaning do not seek outside yourself, look within. The ultimate form of self
Do not seek outside yourself, look within. Let's break that down real quick. Everything you're looking for is inside yourself. The validation you think you want from others is the validation you want from yourself. This is why when people buy a fancy car, they see a faster one go by and they have to buy a new one. It's never enough. Whatever you do on the outside is never going to be enough. It's the internal work. It's the things you fix on the inside that make you satisfied with yourself. Like there was a time and place where I thought that for me to be happy, I would have to become successful. I would have to have millions of dollars. I'd have to have this. I'd have to have that. I was living purely off ambition. And the idea of ambition is the idea of eventual self-destruction. And it's only when you come to grips with who you are, it's only coming to grips with who you truly are and expressing that true self when you don't seek anything else. And that's really the secret to it. Like you could encapsulate Emerson's entire belief into this one phrase. That's probably why he led with it.
Self-mastery lies in searching for answers on your own, relying on nothing external. You think for yourself rather than sheepishly accepting other people's ideas. You value your individual experience over the knowledge gained from everything else. That's why reading isn't enough. You must apply what makes sense to you and learn from it firsthand. You value
Emerson saw the need to read, Emerson saw the need to study, but he believed it shouldn't overwhelm your own opinions. Like obviously you need some form of education because you're influenced by everyone around you, so you're going to be influenced by people that aren't seeking out God, seeking out a higher power, seeking out some spiritual connection, whereas like you have to go read things before you can form your own opinion. Like I think it's only now after reading so much for the past few years where I'm starting to form my own ideology, and it's like I find more of it every single day, but there's going to be a certain point where you need to just absorb information and just listen to what everyone else is saying and then take it in. And then one day you'll start to think for yourself. One day it'll start to become your own. One day you'll start to tie different ideas together and take one piece from one thing, take another piece from another thing, reject this entire thing. Like that's really the building blocks of your worldview.
your personal intuition because you know, relying on general opinions, you would end up a frail, inept copy with no real self-worth. You know the lack of conviction would not result in innovative ideas, but in accepting what you've been taught and identifying with it as a whole. In other words, you inevitably end up believing the nonsense of others. Their ignorance spreads over.
I think this is slightly incorrect because he's talking about it in the sense of like doing something great, where Emerson didn't care about doing anything great. Emerson believed that when you stress yourself, great things come. It's not about doing something for the sake of doing something. It's about becoming yourself. And if something happens, it happens. But if it doesn't, you still ended up finding yourself. I mean, this is the same idea with Walden. Like Emerson was basically Henry David Thoreau's like idol. Um, maybe not idol, maybe like an inspiration. I don't know if it was completely influenced by him. I know Thoreau also read the Bhagavad Gita and he read some Vedic philosophy. I don't know if that's philosophy. I don't know if that's a religion. Don't get mad at me. But it's the same thing with Walden. Walden's like when you retreat into yourself, you don't need anything else. So it's not about achievement. It's about becoming yourself. If something great comes out of it, then great. But it's not. That shouldn't be the end all be all. Like let's face it, every single achievement that you will ever do will eventually fade to dust. I don't care who you are. There's going to be a day where everyone forgets Michael Jordan. There's going to be a day where everyone forgets Donald Trump, Barack Obama, whatever person that is so synonymous with this day and age will eventually be forgotten, and you think that you're going to persist. You think that you're going to remain. Like it's very weird to me that this is how we live our life and this is how we base the value of our life. Whereas like it's just the natural cycle of things, and once we accept this, we can stop trying to force ourselves to do something great. We can stop trying to force ourselves to, you know, forego all happiness just so that we can get some arbitrary achievement in this world. Whereas the only thing that really matters is the simplicity, having a family, living out in the wilderness, doing things for yourself. That's where you really find value. That's where you really find meaning. It's not about the hustle bustle. It's not about keeping up with the Joneses. It's the opposite. When you do the simple things and that's all you have, that's when you can appreciate them most. That's when you can be the most gracious. But when you have everything, when you have everything pulling for your attention, this is when you can never take a deep breath and say, damn, my life is great. This is that idea.
Over to you if you don't make up your own mind. Ideally, you form your opinion on lots of research from reliable sources, sticking to facts, logic, and persuasive arguments. You are a unique, authentic individual who trusts his gut and understands the profound power of a built-in, bold, and robust creative force. And you understand that staying true to yourself, doing what you think is right, is a necessity for true happiness. You value authenticity and defend your stance in a world of mediocrity in order to keep.
It's not about keeping ahead. This is. I'm going to change this video because this isn't a good representation of Emerson. Emerson Emerson believed that all greatness comes from the self. Like, why concern yourself with other people? Why define other people as mediocrity? Like, maybe that's what makes them happy. Maybe that's what gives them meaning. But Emerson was of the belief that like the greatest thing you can do in your life is remain yourself in a world that wants to have you conform to everything else, to keep your opinions, especially when they're unpopular. That is the greatest test of a good life. And he also said that to be great is to be misunderstood. I don't know. This is very frustrating to me. Again, it's like uh, you could have your own interpretation of Emerson, but it's like it's not. It's thinking of it from a very materialistic sense, where Emerson's philosophy is a spiritual philosophy. It's not a tool for self development. It's a tool for self discovery. Like you don't become better through Emerson's ideas. You become yourself. That may make you better. That may give you desirable traits in the ideas of society, but it's not about that. It's about becoming yourself and not needing anything. That's what it's about. Hold on, we'll go to this one. This one's
Expressors.
I was so excited for that video too.
Ralph Waldo Emerson is regarded as one of the primary founders of American.
Calling Emerson a philosopher pisses me off. He's so much more than a philosopher. I think it was maybe it was Nietzsche. Someone described Emerson as the only great mind to ever come out of America. And like, yeah, I would have to agree. Um, maybe you can make an argument for Thoreau. Maybe you can make an argument that like if he had lived longer, he certainly would have had the impact that Emerson had. And honestly, some people I think know Thoreau but don't know Emerson. They definitely know the book Walden more than they would know anything that was written by Emerson. But like Emerson has influenced so many influential authors that it's like you can't disregard him. I don't know. Like he's up here, Thoreau's here, and then Mark Twain's like down here. I like Mark Twain, but it's not like there's interesting like it's an interesting story. There's interesting social commentary. You can definitely see like his politics bleed into the things and that sort of stuff. But I don't think it's nearly as like when you read Emerson, it's a spiritual journey. It's a it's like a you feel like you found an answer to a question you've been looking for your entire life, and you're baffled because the answer was right in front of you. That's what happens when you read Emerson. Um, I think at some point I'm going to have to narrate his best essays. Maybe we do that in a stream. Maybe I break down certain points of it. Would you want to see that, Fluffy Kitty? I'm trying to think. I need to think of a format how to do this because like all the videos that I've gone through, like it's a very cursory view of Emerson where it's like you don't do Emerson justice by simply talking about the bare minimum, simply talking about the like surface level stuff. I mean, like the last video we were watching, it was like very like hacky in the sense of like it's like, yeah, if you do this, you'll become better than others. It's like that's not what it's about. It's about becoming yourself. When you become yourself, you don't need to be better than anyone else. And that's the secret to these things. Like everyone is focused on outpacing everyone else, and it's like you don't need to outpace everyone else when you don't want anything. When you don't want anything, that's when you find yourself. That's really the secret to enlightenment. Transcending the self, transcending everything that you've been taught. This is Osho's idea that you were born perfect, but made imperfect. I mean, this is also Jung's thought as well. Like Jung basically said that like the unconscious mind develops as you get older and older and older, and we're slowly being influenced more and more by the things that we might not necessarily remember, but they have such a hold over our mind and they affect us in ways that we can't even imagine. Yeah, I mean, these are interesting ideas, but it's just like kind of pissed off.
In literature and can be credited with inspiring many prolific writers, writing styles, cultural perspectives, and philosophical movements. Emerson was born in 1803 in Boston, Massachusetts, to Ruth Haskins and William Emerson, his father being a Christian minister descending from a lineage of previous ministers. During his adolescence, Emerson studied at Harvard University, and following graduation, he would go on to teach at his brother.
He like he like bounced around between a bunch of different jobs. He really couldn't find anything that made him happy. And eventually he found writing, but like you could see like early on in his life he wouldn't be considered like a success. He was like just like average, but he knew there was so much more.
Brothers School for Young Women. After several years of teaching, he would then enroll into divinity school at Harvard to train to become a pastor. In 1829, he was ordained into Boston's Second Church and would spend the following 3 years or so as a pastor. During this time, however, Emerson would find an increasing sense of detachment and disagreement with traditional religious practices and ways of thinking. Specifically, he found that contemporary
The Probably the reason why I like Emerson so much is he's such a nonconformist. Like you show me a belief system and I immediately like look to the things that don't work, look to the things that don't make sense. Like belief systems are good until you start asking questions that don't agree with the policy, and then it becomes like, oh, you just have to have faith, you just need to do this, you just need to do this. It's like I'd rather go my own way. You know what I mean? I'd rather find out I'm wrong than believe in anything that limits me.
Christianity countered and sedated the very essence of human spirituality that it was supposed.
What did Nietzsche say? Nietzsche said Jesus was the last Christian, meaning, right? That's what Nietzsche said. Nietzsche said Jesus was the last Christian, meaning that after Jesus died, there were no more Christians because the idea of Christianity is following Jesus instead of trying to act like him. And it's like, shouldn't we try to live up to the example he set instead of worship it as if we can't achieve that? Because the Bible literally says the kingdom of heaven is within you. Jesus says in the Bible, anything I've done, you can do as well. Meaning that we too have these abilities. We too have this power locked inside of us. And it's like, I don't I don't get why like we look for anything through the external. We look to signs, we look to a blessing coming to us, whereas like God speaks through us. Like God doesn't perform miracles in any other way aside from doing it through us. And it's like we just need to look into this to the self to find the answers. We just need to look into the self to find the idea that's going to get us out of there. Like I'm telling you, when the chips are down and you have faith that you can figure it out, the answer always comes. And do you think that answer is from you or do you think it's from a higher power? It's a pretty simple answer to me, but again, like these are questions of faith, and we live in a faithless era. We live in an era where people have all but given up hope. People have all but sunk into the material and don't feel the spiritual forces that course within them all throughout the day. And it's really sad too, because like these are things you can cultivate. Like, what is creativity aside from the expression of God? Listen to Frank Sinatra singing "My Way." Is that a song, or is there something more speaking through him? Is there a force that moves you that you can't explain? This is what you see in true works of genius, and this is why true works of genius really speak to us because it hits at something that is beyond our comprehension. It hits at something that no normal human could create except through the expression of a higher power. And that's why art's so beautiful. That's why we all appreciate, the works of Da Vinci, the Sistine Chapel, all of these great Renaissance painters, all of these great singers. You listen to the Beatles, is that like anything else you've ever heard? Could that ever be replicated? Could that sound ever exist again? No. That's why we appreciate these things so much because it's the expression of God in our world.
Supposed to inspire. Around 3 years after becoming a pastor, and after about 1 year following his first wife's young death of tuberculosis, Emerson resigned from the church. I have sometimes thought that, in order to be a good minister, it was necessary to leave the ministry.
This is a very important line. This is what I was talking about earlier, though. Like, at a certain point, you either become yourself or you curtail who you are to be part of a system, curtail who you are to sacrifice some value here, some value there. And it's usually not worth it. This is why Osho said, I believe in nothing, because there's no such thing as a rule without an exception. And it's understanding this paradox of belief systems are great, but belief systems are also limited. And it's taking the good from each one and applying it into your life to make your life better.
Emerson wrote in his journal. Following his stint as a pastor, Emerson spent the next years writing and publishing his first major essays while developing a career as a public lecturer. Emerson would make his first significant mark on the public with his controversial lectures that suggested the value of separating from commonly withheld religious ideas and traditions, and in place, argued for infusing new, independent, forward thinking that relied on the self for divine experience and understanding.
If you look into the Bible, it's really a work of self-development. It's really a work of finding your spirit. The allegory's all there. It's just we're not taught this because we're not supposed to know this. I don't know if I should say any more about that. It's like, think about it. Like, is the church a spiritual institution or is it a institution of power? Is it an institution of wealth? The Catholic Church has more money than any bank, any company in the earth on the earth, and they don't pay any taxes. So it's just going to continue to be the richest thing on the world, the richest entity in the world. And it's like, imagine the good they could do with that wealth. Like if Jesus came back right now and said, "We are giving away all of this wealth, we are selling all of these churches, we're going to get rid of all this wealth and actually help the people." Do you think that's what would happen? Do you think they'd be sitting on this vast amount of wealth if it was for the spiritual development of man? Or do you think in some way it's biased? Do you think in some way it gets away from the message of God? Like the Bible says the love of money is evil. I don't know about you, but I don't see the church giving away more than they make. I don't know about you, but I don't see the church, giving away just as much as they are getting in appreciation. You know what I mean? They already don't pay taxes. Like why do they need so much? Why do they need all these artifacts? Why, like you know what I'm saying? It's when you begin to ask these questions, you begin to say like maybe it's on the self. Maybe the lessons are taken on the individual and not taken on society as a whole. And this is like some of the key examples that you'll get in the Bible is, I mean, obviously the birth and resurrection are symbolic of certain things. Go join my school if you want to know what those are. Um, I don't feel like getting into it right now, but it's the same thing with let he who hath no sin cast the first stone. Like it's so ironic that this is one of the most well-known phrases in the Bible, yet some of the strictest Christians are the first ones to judge you. The entire ideology is until you purify your soul to such a level that you no longer have sin, do not judge others. Do not condemn others. Are any of these people that are telling you that you're wrong to do this, that you're wrong to do that, that you're going to hell, that you're this, like judgment is literally the work of the devil. And these people are just openly like doing it. I think it's insane to me. I think it's crazy to me. But again, we can go on and on with my gripes about institutions. I think we should get back into Emerson.
During the following decades, Emerson continued giving lectures and producing several major influential works of literature. He would soon become recognized as one of the mid-19th century leading writers and thinkers, inspiring individuals like Henry David Thoreau, Friedrich Nietzsche, Walt Whitman, Emily Dickinson, and innumerable others. as well as being the
I think Thoreau understood his ideology the best. Nietzsche, I wish Nietzsche read more Emerson because I don't think his life would have ended in the same way. Because Emerson's stuff is inspirational. Like Nietzsche's stuff, it breaks down beliefs, but it doesn't replace it with anything. And that's why he attempts to replace it with the Ubermensch, the Superman, um, getting beyond your human capabilities. But like the dude literally had a mental breakdown for 11 years because he saw a police officer beating his horse. Like, I don't know if that's really the example to live your life by. I think Emerson is a much better example.
key figure in helping give way to new cultural perspectives and philosophical movements, especially the philosophy known as Transcendentalism, which Emerson is regarded as the father of. Emerson's philosophy can perhaps be best explained.
It's just returning to nature. And it's not returning to nature in the sense of returning to like living in the woods. It's simplifying your life so that you're doing the things you were like designed to do. Like basic survival aspects, like not hoarding wealth, not seeking fame, not seeking ambition, not succumbing to the desires that they're thrust upon you from a young age in society.
In two of his most famous essays, Nature, published in 1836, and Self-Reliance,
This
published in
is the best one.
1841. Between these two works,
I'm
Emerson
I need to
primarily
read this one
discusses
still. I haven't read Nature yet. I'm really excited to. There's another really good one. It's called Circles is really good as well. And so is History. Self-Reliance is like 12 pages in a book. So you can find all these essays online for free because Emerson died in like 1860 or something like that. Or no, maybe 1880. I think he lived well into old age. But he's been dead so long that everything he's written is in public domain. So like it's really easy to go find all of this stuff, especially if you're in the US because um things go into public domain of it's 70 years plus the life of the author. So after Emerson died, whenever 70 years after that was. So most of these things you get online for free. It's it's so inspiring. Like the thing about Emerson is you have to like sit back and digest it. You can't just read it and like fly through it and then move on to something new. It's like each time you read a page of Emerson, you unfold a layer of your soul. I think that's the best way to put it. And it's something that requires reflection and like the first the first reading of Emerson, I'm like, what was that meaning? And then it clicks like weeks later. It comes to me weeks later. So yeah, they're not really that easy to read just because they're so deep, just because it's so poetic. And the best thing about it is it's so poetic that it's going to give you a different lesson than it gives me.
man and nature being a unified singular whole, the value of trusting one's own intuition and sense of reality, and the realization and forthright expression of one's unique greatness and truth. More specifically, Emerson posed that all of nature is an expression and permeation of one metaphysical essence of the universe, or God, and that we are all both the expressions and expressors of this singular oneness. Nature in its
Emerson read a lot of Eastern philosophy, I'm pretty sure, and that's where this idea comes from. I think a good analogy would be like Emerson's very similar to Alan Watts, where he takes Eastern ideas and puts them into a Western mindset. But Emerson's so poetic about it. Like, I don't necessarily really like poetry because a lot of times I think it's just like, all right, you're not like really telling me anything about life. It's kind of just like there's no real depth to it. Whereas Emerson's like you read it and you're like, wow. Like when you read The Prophet, that's some great poetry. When you read the Book of Mere Dad, it's very poetic. Emerson's at that level as well.
ministry to man, Emerson wrote, is not only the material but is also the process and the result. In this, there is no separation between humanity and nature, where humanity can will itself onto nature, nor nature onto humanity, but rather, everything is essentially nature interacting with nature. Standing on the bare ground, my head bathed by the blithe air, and uplifted into infinite space, all mean egotism vanishes. I become a transparent eyeball. I am nothing, I see all. The currents of the universal being circulate through me. I am part or particle of God.
The most interesting expressions of this idea that he's talking about, you would think it would come from Taoism or Buddhism or maybe even the Vedas. Shit, I grabbed the wrong book. It comes from this book right here, Ethics by Baruch. I think Baruch. I don't know how to say it, but Spinoza. Read the first like 30 pages of this. I'm sure you can find it online for free. And if you don't already believe in God, you'll believe in God. If you already believe in God, you'll think something different. What's up, Ashley? How's it going? Took you long enough to get here. Can't believe it. Guys, we have to give Ashley a bunch of L's because she's late.
Emerson wrote. For Emerson, the distinction between the trees, the bugs, the dirt, the stars, and everything else is all but a phenomenal distinction, not necessarily a real one. Rather, he believed that God is one thing found in everything and through everything, every object, every individual, and every particle of existence in the eternal now. As such, for Emerson, the
Basically, Taoism. I think that's the easiest way to understand it.
transcendent spiritual experience is not found from any outward, previous, or future source, but within the individual in any given moment. Moments where one's own mind illuminates the common features of their surroundings with potency, beauty, and interconnectedness. Alongside this, Emerson also asserted that nature is in a constant state of flux and that we must live in coordination with its process, trusting our own intuition and flowing with the changing self. In order to do this, he argued that we must not hold ourselves to ideas, beliefs, or traditions of the past, including our own. Rather, Emerson suggested that our state is subject to change, and consequently, we might feel or think one way today and the opposing way tomorrow.
The ability to change is one of the things that makes life worth living. I think this is an Osho idea. Osho said that the moment you stop changing is the moment you die. And there's a ton of people who are sitting in nursing homes right now and they're dead. They're not changing. They haven't embraced any new idea. They haven't tried anything new. What's the point to go on living if you don't do anything new? Wouldn't that get boring? Shouldn't you just accept the changes of life? One of the greatest things Seneca ever said, I love Seneca. I think he's the greatest Stoic philosopher that was ever alive. Maybe there's one that's better that I haven't read yet, but he's head and shoulders above Marcus Aurelius. He's head and shoulders above Epictetus or Epictetus. I don't know how to say it, but basically what he was saying was the last challenge he has to face is old age. And old age is a great thing because as every second, passes, as every day closes, each day gets more and more meaningful because he has less and less time. So as he's trying to cling on to this time, it means more and more and more. It's such a beautiful sentiment. And he also said that like he's faced every other challenge and this next one is going to be the last one. It's so beautiful.
Instead of fighting this, however, Emerson argued that we must lean into it. No man, he wrote, can antedate his experience or guess what faculty or feeling a new object shall unlock, any more than he can draw today the face of.
You've been here? I don't know. I don't know. Let's see. Cody almost
A
attacked me.
person whom he shall see tomorrow for the first time.
I told
In
him
other
that.
words, no one can know what life might be like tomorrow, nor what such life may cause one to think or feel. However, one must move with it and live according to the present now. Out of this emerges what is perhaps Emerson's most popular concept, known as self-reliance. Emerson argued that we often neglect to ever realize the unique perspective and greatness that comes from our particular culmination.
There's another really good essay by Emerson. It's called Compensation. That is perhaps that's up there with any of his other essays. And the basic idea is that there is compensation with anything in the universe. Any bad means that a good is happening somewhere. Any any sort of bad characteristic is also a good characteristic because let's say you're short, like there's a lot of short people that went out and achieved a lot of things. Like look at Napoleon. Like let's say that you're losing your hair, that means you have to compensate in other ways. Like there's no such thing as a bad characteristic. It's just the way we interpret things. And it's the same way with every single opportunity. Anytime we're faced with a challenge, it's an opportunity to grow. Anytime we're given a victory, it means that we're not going to learn the lesson that we should have learned. Like how many times have you won but you really shouldn't have? And then the next time you challenge yourself, you lose. And it's because that last victory didn't prepare you for a harder challenge. It just made you more overconfident.
Nation of experiences and states, not because we don't have access to such greatness, but because we are often held back and pulled away from it by others and systems of convention. For Emerson, great artists, thinkers, writers, and so on aren't necessarily great merely because they possess access to any higher exclusive source of information or being, but because they are willing to address and express candidly what they feel in any given moment of life.
They're great because they're themselves. And Emerson said that in every work of genius, you see a part of yourself, and you see a part of yourself that's never been expressed. And that's why it's a work of genius.
Despite how it might reflect on the standard norm. And in doing so, they reveal not only their unique take on the world, but also the thoughts and sensations hidden within a great many others who feel the same. Arguably, great.
I don't know if this is a saying, I don't know if this is just a popular idea, but it's the idea that I'd rather be hated for who I am than loved for who I'm not. And that's the basic premise of self-reliance. Like to be yourself in a world full of people that want you to conform is the greatest triumph.
Artists and writers aren't merely popular because they say something no one has thought of or experienced before, but because they say something that most of us have, but weren't sure if we were right to do so. Emerson believed that for the sake of one's work and sense of self, the individual must rely on themselves alone and recognize that what they feel and think is real and legitimate. In a very Cartesian
Even if you're wrong, it's the willingness to be wrong. It's the willingness to butt your head out and admit that this is how I feel right now. And if it's proven that you're incorrect, you're willing to own up to it. But it's that ability to stick your neck out and say what you believe in.
idea, if we can know anything at all, it is merely that we exist, and if we can suppose anything at all, it is merely our own experience. This does not disparage our sympathy for others' ideas, nor our connection with the natural world, but rather it serves to prevent the disparagement of ourself amidst it all. It serves to promote trust in our own unique interpretations and experiences, and encourages us to express their individual merit. In slight contrast to Emerson, it appears reasonable to also argue that perhaps there are variations in the resources and conditions of each individual.
This is the biggest cop out ever. No one is equal with resources, but we're all equal with the faculties we've been given. Emerson has this is one of the stupid like to include this in a video of Emerson is very it pisses me off because Emerson has an entire essay called History where he says history belongs to all men. To be jealous of someone else's accomplishments is to be jealous of your divine gift to achieve whatever it is that anyone else achieves. If someone else has done it, that means you can do it as well. And not even just that, you can do it better because that's how human progression works. Someone had to break the 4 minute mile first, and within a year, 20 more people have broken it because there was that imaginary block that like nobody could run it. And then once it was proven, everyone outdid this guy. That's how these things work. And like to add this as a caveat to Emerson is like almost the biggest slap in the face that you can imagine.
And thus, one's ability to trust and or express themselves is not always equal. If nature and human is a unified whole carried out through a process of self-fulfilling change, is it not also possible that one's own ability to defend and tap into themselves and greatness and the notion of self-reliance holds steady? Of course, like all philosophies and philosophers, Emerson's ideas in general aren't without flaws or counter.
Emerson's ideas are without flaw. They are. If there's ever a philosopher to read, it's Emerson. He's the only one that I've read that I can't push back to. He's truly the only one. And it's like the reason why is it's because it's more of a spiritual philosophy than it is a material one. And that's really where the truth lies in this world. Like I mean a lot of the criticism of Nietzsche are like his philosophy didn't work. Like it didn't make him happy, it didn't make him better. It just made him bitter. And it's like, yeah, you're smart, but that smartness led to your destruction. Like why is that something that should be copied? I'm not even gonna listen to the rest of it because look what this guy's saying. Do you guys want to keep listening to Emerson? what I'm like gaining from these videos is that like I should type out a script, put it through an AI, and then just post the video because it's like it's frustrating.
Emerson possesses that
This is a really interesting video, by the way.
kindly intellectual cheerfulness, which deprecates too much seriousness. He has absolutely no idea of how old he is already and how young he will yet be. Nietzsche loved the writings of Ralph Waldo Emerson, but
This is one of the weirdest connections you would never see because Emerson's one of the most uplifting people, and Nietzsche is one of the most depressing. But I mean, it's the thing. The thing about Nietzsche that's depressing is he destroys all conventions, and to destroy all conventions, like for many people, is a world-shattering event. And it's being able to move on from these ideas that can give you the ultimate freedom. But a lot of people get stuck at the place where the conventions are destroyed, and that's really the downfall of existentialism. That's really where it leads to nihilism, where nothing matters. There's there's like the white pill that's absurdism. I think absurdism is one of the coolest philosophies, but yeah, it's
mysteriously, his praise is generally not found in his published works. We need to look beyond those to find the reasons for which Nietzsche held Emerson in such high esteem. For example, scholars have studied Nietzsche's private library and found that he wildly annotated Emerson's essays, underlining entire paragraphs and dotting the margins with exclamation marks of approval. Or we can look at Nietzsche's private letter correspondence, what he wrote to friends, letters that brim with praise for the American philosopher. Passages like this one: I find in Emerson a brother soul.
that's so cool.
In this video, we'll take a deeper look at this admiration. We don't have a lot of published words to go by, so there is necessarily a degree of speculation involved. But what is unmistakably true is that both Nietzsche and Emerson championed individualism, taking matters into your own hands, especially when it comes to education, which is where brilliant this video is.
I think all great philosophies have an idea of individualism in them. Skip the
Quoted
ad.
earlier, where Nietzsche
Should we just
calls
watch the
Emerson a
ad?
brother soul, or in other words, a kindred spirit. Where does this compliment come from?
I just like purposely nuke the viewership so that I don't have to keep streaming.
Since Emerson is only briefly mentioned in 3 published works, it makes sense to start with those. In Twilight of the Idols, Nietzsche praises Emerson's intellectual cheerfulness, which discourages seriousness. He contrasted the writings of Emerson with those of Thomas Carlyle, an influential Scottish writer and historian whose work Nietzsche found heavy, overly verbose, serious, and boring. In Daybreak,
I don't get the point of taking yourself seriously. I don't get the point of taking life seriously. It's like, yeah, you can. Maybe you achieve more in the long end, but like, what's the point if you're not as happy? What's the point if you don't enjoy every single second of it? Like, I get hard work, I get that, but like, it should also be enjoyable. Shouldn't be something like, have you ever been in like I guess one of the greatest examples is like, I once worked for a country club and like they were so serious when it came to like serving out the meals, and it was like even if we were serious, we would still mess up. Like it wasn't like nobody's like, oh my God, the service was terrible. They got the wrong order and then brought a new one in 20 seconds. Like like you know what I mean? It's like it's not that deep, and it's like simply just being a human being is the greatest service that you could give. And I don't get why these people don't understand it, but again, so people are stuck in their ways. So
he called Carlyle an arrogant old muddlehead and a grumbler. Emerson is the opposite, and Nietzsche enjoyed and strove towards joyfulness himself, not only in life, but in writing and in philosophy as well. Joyfulness is a major theme throughout Nietzsche's work. It was Nietzsche's answer to the prevailing pessimism of his day, an antidote to the tidal wave of nihilism that he predicted would wash over Europe.
I haven't read any young Nietzsche yet, so when I do, maybe I'll see the happiness, but I've only seen the sadness.
In Emerson, he found a writer who exemplified this ideal of joy. Nietzsche doesn't explicitly reference passages or essays, but we can make some educated guesses. For example, this passage from Emerson's essay on nature. The lover of nature is he whose inward and outward senses are still truly adjusted to each other, who has retained the spirit of infancy even into the era of manhood. His intercourse with heaven and earth becomes part of his daily food.
Spirit of intimacy in infancy is just like curiosity. Like, think of when you were a kid and you were excited to learn something. Think about when you saw a tree and you're like, wow, like It's that aspect of things. And I feel like we slowly lose this as we get older because as we get older, we put more emphasis on our career, on this, on that, on bills, on like on all of these things that really don't matter in the grand scheme of things, and we forget about like the entire purpose of life, which is just to be happy, just to be present, just to live. And like when we take all of our attention off of like this moment right now, that's when everything starts to go wrong. That's when we start to fixate on everything that is out of order. It's like every single person who has ever lived has a sob story, has something going wrong in their life. It's only the people that don't fixate on these ideas at all times of the day that are happy. That's the secret to life. That's the secret to happiness. It's not ignoring them. It's just, can you do anything about it in the moment? If you can't, then why does it matter? If you can't fix it right now, what good does it do to continue to focus on it? Work on it when you can work on it. Work on it when the time comes. Work on it when you can do something about it. But until that moment, it's just only making the issue worse because the more you focus on something, the bigger it becomes. The more details that you notice. If you don't believe me, understand that like we're bombarded all day long with different stimulus. And like, even if you look into your room right now, you'll notice details that you've never seen before. You'll notice cracks, you'll notice scratches, you'll notice something that's in your room, that's in your house that you've never observed simply because we always focus on one thing at a time. We always focus on the negative. We always focus on the stressors. Focus on the good stuff. Put your time, energy, and attention into the good things. They'll begin to multiply. They'll begin to become more apparent in your life. You're never going to get over bad things. They're going to continue to happen. They're going to continue to be there. So why put all your attention into it? It's so weird to me. It's so
In the presence
backwards.
of nature, a wild delight runs through the man, in spite of real sorrows. This leads us neatly to a second point of agreement between the two, their love of nature and solitude. Nietzsche spent his days walking on either Mediterranean coastlines or hiking in the Swiss Alps. He likened himself and his literary avatar Zarathustra to an eagle who lives high up in the mountains, alone, only occasionally coming down to mingle with society below. Nature metaphors feature prominently in his writings, for example when he compares his philosophy to fresh, cold mountain air. And whereas Nietzsche spent his time on coastlines in Italy or mountain ranges in Switzerland, Emerson preferred the forests of Concord, Massachusetts. In any case, both men regarded time spent alone in nature as essential.
Like the most calming things you can do is I don't know where everyone in the chat lives. I don't know if you're surrounded by woods, but if you are, you can just do this at home, or if you're not, you can just go into like a wooded area and sit down, calm yourself down, and just notice all of the noises. Feel the trees moving, feel the birds, feel the wind, feel every single thing that's happening. And as you become aware of these things, it begins to just calm you down like nothing else. Just that ability to sit back in nature and relax is something that I really hate about the winter because you can't really. I guess you could relax in the cold, but it's a lot harder.
To go into solitude, a man needs to retire as much from his chamber as from society. I am not solitary whilst I read and write, though nobody is with me. But if a man would be alone, let him look at the stars. More broadly speaking, this move towards nature is not only good because of nature itself. On a more abstract level, the return to nature epitomizes an appreciation for the material world, for this world. This attitude would have been a breath of fresh air to Nietzsche, who spent a lot of time arguing against so-called Hinterwelt philosophies that regard the material world with suspicion.
It's the it's the return to simplicity. That's what this guy was saying. It's noticing the little things that make everything else mean so much more. It's that idea.
Saying the world of the senses is either illusory or even evil. In Nietzsche's conception of philosophical history, the Hinterwelt is the common ground unifying such disparate philosophies as Platonism and Christianity, Kant and Schopenhauer. In one way or another, and to varying degrees, these philosophies preach a distrust of the material, natural world, which for Nietzsche was an avenue to nihilism. He opposed the Hinterwelt idea and wanted to return the natural world to its former status of importance. Any philosopher who would therefore argue in favor of nature could count on Nietzsche's approval. From the pre-Socratic nature philosophers like Empedocles and Heraclitus,
Most of if you one of Nietzsche's greatest books, I went so many different directions and then finally said one of Nietzsche's greatest books is Beyond Good and Evil, where he just destroys every single belief system that has ever
All the
existed.
way to Ralph Waldo Emerson. But for Nietzsche to heap so much praise on a single individual, there must be more to their kinship than mere love of nature. So, what other commonalities can we explore? Nietzsche considered himself a poet. This aspect of his philosophy tends to be overlooked, but his books are filled with poetry and song lyrics. The
Yeah.
Joyful Science, in particular, contains a lot of poetry, and in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche regularly has his Zarathustra burst into song. In the foreword to the second edition of The Birth of Tragedy, Nietzsche criticized himself for the way in which he wrote this book. Looking back on it 14 years later, he writes,
Even a lot of his normal writing, you can interpret in more than one way. So, I mean, you can say like poetry is words put into a set style, but I don't like to take that interpretation. I like to think poetry is anything that's you can read in between the lines.
it should have sung this new soul and not spoken. What a pity that I did not dare to say what I then had.
Like the normal rhyming scheme poems are so boring to me. Um, yeah, there's almost an artistry to craft poems where the syllables are a certain way and there's a certain rhyme scheme. Like, yeah, that's impressive, but I don't like limitations. I don't like restrictions. Maybe if it's well thought out, maybe if it's really well done, but I would just hesitate to be super all for that.
To say, as a poet. I could have done so, perhaps. Nietzsche always styled himself as an artist philosopher, and a recurring theme throughout his writings is his crusade against the boring, serious, monotonous style of his fellow German scholars. He championed song and dance, laughter and joy. Philosophy should not be practiced by professors in dusty offices, sitting at their desk for 12 hours per day. Nietzsche himself gave the good example by hiking in nature and the mountains for hours and hours on end. Again, writing about the way in which he regretted the style of The Birth of Tragedy, he says, "For the time being, I had hidden myself under the hood of the scholar, under the German's gravity and disinclination for dialectics, even under the bad manners of the Wagnerian." Nietzsche's
It's interesting how like you see Nietzsche get away from the the institutional learning side of things. You see Jung get away from it. You see Emerson get away from it. It's like these people were all in academia, but they were like, no, this is limiting. And yet we think only intellectuals are the people that are teaching others. It's very weird.
stress on artistry, lyrics, and poetics attracted him to Emerson, who also wrote poetry alongside his philosophy. Consider this excerpt from Emerson's poem Bacchus, which would have certainly captured Nietzsche's attention, Bacchus being the Roman equivalent of the Greek wine god Dionysus, who plays a prominent role in Nietzsche's own
I
philosophy.
think I've read this.
Wine, which music is. Music and wine are one. That I, drinking this, shall hear far chaos talk with me. Kings
Sounds so
unborn shall
familiar.
walk with me, and the poor grass shall plot and plan what it will do when it is man. Quick and so will I unlock every crypt of every rock. Themes of music, intoxication, and a type of knowledge resulting from the chaotic drunkenness brought forth by Dionysian ecstasy. These are all exceedingly Nietzschean themes, penned down by Emerson, who, as far as we know, had never read Nietzsche.
The thing is, it doesn't matter who these people have read, who these great minds have read, because if you trace back every single great philosopher, or at least every single philosopher that I think is great, they all have common threads of individuality in them. They all have common threads of the individual's perception and the individual's ability to shape their own world through their perception. And there's a certain fundamental aspect to like all of these things that kind of bleed through. Like you see Emerson in Taoism, you see Emerson in Buddhism, you see Emerson in Gnosticism and alchemy, in Jung, in Nietzsche. Anyone that talks about individuality talk about the same principles. Even Manly P. Hall to a certain extent. Depends if you consider Manly P. Hall great or not. I think he's a very, very great example of someone that had a very good grasp of philosophical ideas. But
You can just imagine Nietzsche
he
reading
never got the respect because he wasn't educated in any institution. He was self-educated. He focused purely on esoteric natures, whereas Emerson certainly um, explored more esoteric ideas, but he didn't outright say them. It's you again. How's it going, Kenny? How's everything, man?
these words and finding in Emerson a kindred spirit, like a lost brother. I infer the capacity of music to give birth to myth, that is to say, the most significant exemplar and precisely tragic myth, the myth which speaks of Dionysian knowledge in its symbols. These thinkers were so attracted to poetry because both of their worldviews emerged from the Romantic tradition. One of the key tenets of Romanticism is that knowledge is not exclusively rational in nature. It was a counter-movement to the Enlightenment.
It's so frustrating that this is how we think, that every single piece of knowledge is purely from the active mind. There's no creative aspect to things. There's no creative element to things. Even how we view creativity um, is so warped because creativity purely is a unconscious force that we listen to and we get the answer to any question we ask it. It's just being open to these answers. You missed my shiny head. Fuck you. No, I'm just kidding. Thanks for saying that. I always gotta like be like fuck you when someone says something like that, but just no, I don't take it to heart. Thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out, dude.
With its heavy focus on
How long
reason.
has it been
Romanticism
since
gives
you were
room to
here?
intuition, emotion, the wild chaos of nature. It allows for the possibility of knowledge that is not founded on logical principles or abstract concepts, but a different type of knowledge, something closer to a feeling rather than a reasoning. Poetry was explored as an avenue to arrive at these.
Whenever you have a gut feeling, it's usually correct. This is what Jung called a synchronicity. There's a certain element of perception that will never be explained by science, that can never be explained by science because it's outside any means to be measured, but it is always there. And it's weird because we don't really give credit to it, but when we listen to our guts, this is when we always make the best decisions. And usually your gut feeling leads you in the right direction. And it's only after the fact that you can realize what it was. You know what I mean? It's been weeks. I didn't use YouTube. Why, you were just on it too much? I feel like I've been on YouTube a lot recently. I literally had to delete Instagram and Twitter off my phone because I was just using it so much. Like, I get you, man. Like, it's better to take breaks from this shit than like you can ever imagine. It's just so destructive to your mind because think about it. Like, if you check your phone every 10 minutes, every 30 minutes, every hour, like it's gonna take you a few minutes to get back into whatever you were doing. And now you do this for years on end. Like, how much more things could you have worked for? Like, I'm not saying like it had to be all grind, but like, dude, if I didn't check my phone at all during the day, like I could have written like 5 books today. I could have filmed 100 fucking videos. I could have streamed the entire, you know what I mean? It's like when you put things in perspective that way, it's like, why do I even do this? Cut down on things, man. I love my life when there was no phones. Yeah, yeah. I'm. This is the next thing I'm going to try to get out of my life. Like, I need to fix my sleep schedule, one, but I also need to fix my cell phone usage because it's like, have you ever been at the point where you like close Instagram, you close TikTok, you close Twitter, and then you open it up 5 seconds later and you're like, I have a fucking problem. Like that's something I gotta fucking get over. Bro, what the fuck?
These kind of supra-rational
Thank
insights.
God that
This is
emoji
why art
doesn't come
becomes a
through
hugely
YouTube,
important
because if
theme
it's
in the
what I
Romantic
think it
era.
is,
Schopenhauer too believed that in listening to music or contemplating a great piece of art, we can learn something that is otherwise inaccessible to our faculties of reason. So all of this is not unique to either Nietzsche or Emerson, but what is noteworthy is how both philosophers tried their hand at poetry and actually published their works too. In Nietzsche's case, not even as a separate work, but right there in the middle of his philosophy books.
Emerson's essays all have poetry in them as well. I
That's
don't know
how
if he's gonna say
important
that.
poetry was to Nietzsche. So when he came across Emerson, the nature-loving philosopher who not only wrote poetry, but the kind of poetry that would thematically appeal to Nietzsche, it's no wonder he held this American philosopher in such high regard. Finally, let's take a look at one of Ralph Waldo Emerson's most famous essays, Self-Reliance. It abounds with Nietzschean themes, particularly concerning individualism and opposition to mass society and what Nietzsche would call the herd.
They both believe that the society limits the individual for the sake of society. We're watching Nietzsche and Emerson's. similar ideas basically, and why Nietzsche was a fan of Emerson.
Emerson is never quite as elitist as Nietzsche was, and he championed egalitarianism and democracy, but concerning the importance of being yourself, separating yourself from the herd, and embracing solitude, he had remarkably Nietzschean ideas. Consider, for example, this passage. What I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think. This rule, equally arduous in actual and in intellectual life, may serve for the whole distinction between greatness and meanness. It is the harder, because you will always find those who think they know what is your duty better than you know it.
Damn, I missed the quote. All right. What I must do is all that concerns me, not what the people think. This rule, equally arduous in actual and intellectual life, may serve for the whole distinction between greatness and meanness. It is the harder because you will always find those who think they know what is your duty better than you know it. I can't even say anything. Like, this is just, you read quotes like this and you're like, how could you not be like, this is my guy, this is my guy.
What is your duty better than you know it? It is easy in the world to live after the world's opinion. It is easy in solitude to live after our own. But the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude.
This last part of it. That the great man is he who in the midst of the crowd keeps with perfect sweetness the independence of solitude. That like gives me chills. Like we define greatness by being ourselves. We don't define greatness by what society tells us. And this has such a deep truth in it that like I can't begin to explain to the necessary level. It's not about becoming who society wants you to be. It's about becoming yourself. When you become yourself, you don't need anything from society. When you become yourself, that's all you need. You don't want anything else external because you already have self-reliance, self-fulfillment. That's the secret to this all. That's why the people that will chase money to the ends of the earth will always need more. That's why the people that will chase women to the ends of the earth will always need more. That's why the people that will chase power to the ends of the earth will always need more. Because they're searching for everything but themselves. Yes, that's why I feel great every day because I finally become myself. Yes. Isn't it a better feeling than any trophy you could win, any achievement you could get? To be yourself means more than anything else that the world could give you.
The entire essay is worth reading. It's short and freely available. We'll leave a link in the description to where you can download it for yourself.
It's so
There is
true.
no complete agreement.
Self-reliance is like a must read for anyone that follows my channel. Like I'll be very angry at you if you don't read it at some point in your
As
life.
Emerson also writes at length about God and the
And that's
divinity of the
completely
soul,
serious.
the eternal law within man, which is the voice of God. All of this runs counter to Nietzsche's worldview, of course. But then there are also phrases like these. The sour faces of the multitude, like their sweet faces, have no deep cause, but are put on and off as the wind blows and the newspaper directs.
Sour faces of the multitude, like their sweet faces, have no deep cause, but are put on and off as the wind blows and newspaper directs. People are told what to believe instead of believing things for themselves. Isn't this more true today than ever? Think if you're someone in the middle, if you're nonpartisan, you see the errors of both sides and you see the good on both sides, then you're in no man's land. This is even something Thoreau said. Something Thoreau said was, "Why is it that as I'm an independent voter, and because I'm an independent voter, I can't vote in the primary? So because I can't vote in either primary, this means that I'm given candidates that were pre-selected by partisan actors. Why is this the case? It's such a haunting idea that like you have to be one thing or the other. Like two choices is not freedom of choice, it's the illusion of choice.
The newspaper directs. Emerson exalts the so-called great man and opposes the mob, the multitude as he calls them. No man yet knows what is nor can till that person has exhibited. Where is the master who could have taught Shakespeare? Where is the master who could have instructed Franklin or Washington or Bacon or Newton? Every great man is
Yeah. Every great man is unique. What he's saying is becoming great is not becoming better than anyone else, is not seeking anything except seeking yourself.
Is a unique. The Scipionism of Scipio is precisely that part he could not borrow. Shakespeare will never be made by the study of Shakespeare.
Shakespeare will never be made by the study of Shakespeare. If you don't know who Scipio is, you should do your homework. He's one of the most interesting people ever.
Do that which is assigned you, and you
He was
cannot
a
hope
Roman
too much.
general who never lost a single battle. Like he's known as the greatest Roman general ever.
Or dare
Even
too
greater than
much.
Caesar, even
Self
greater than
reliance is above
Pompey.
all a call to action to his readers, to develop themselves, become their own individuals, and rise above their peers. In this respect, Emerson is in complete agreement with Nietzsche.
All right, that's a pretty good video. Um, what was I streaming for? A little over an hour. Okay. I'm trying to think. Should I do one more video using my history books? Oh, that's cool. I didn't know about him until who was I reading about? I was reading about Cicero. Dude, Cicero is perhaps the most interesting person that no one knows about. The stories of Cicero are like so. I'll talk about Cicero before it. Actually, is there a quick video? Honestly, a quick video is not going to do enough. Let me just talk about where's my Streamlabs? Okay, here it is. Oh my god, this is so difficult. The cursor is like terrible. But basically, so Cicero is the entire inspiration for the Renaissance, the entire inspiration for the French and American Revolution. And the reason why the American government is a republic is because of Cicero. It's because they read the writings of Cicero and were inspired by a man willing to die for the republic. And the story of Cicero is he was a Roman politician, he was a Roman lawyer, and at a certain point, he was trying this case. And when he was trying this case, he basically was slandering this government official who stole all the money that was meant for the people. And instead of even putting up a defense, Cicero made such a great case that the Roman official accepted his exile and accepted a harsher punishment than he would have gotten if he just went through the trial because he was so embarrassed. That was the kind of man Cicero was. And he was also a philosopher. He was also a consulate at some point, which is basically like Romans had like two presidents basically. Um, don't ask me why. It really didn't work ever. It was always like one guy was plotting against the other. Um, Americans fixed that one where they had one president instead of two guys. Because, like, imagine like you had like Obama and Trump as president. Like, you think those guys wouldn't be plotting against each other? You think those guys wouldn't be doing dirty tactics? Um, but basically, Cicero wrote his death warrant when first of all he Julius Caesar became dictator for life and basically offered Cicero a role that was so high up that like any other guy would have refused it, but because Cicero believed in the Republic so much, he declined it. He didn't want to be part of the overthrowing of the Roman Republic. And then after Caesar died, Mark Antony took over for a very short time. And Mark Antony was like notorious as like kind of like a party boy. Like he really wasn't that great of a general. He spent so much money, and Cicero wrote like a 30-page essay talking about how Mark Antony blew all of his inheritance as a young man, became a prostitute, and for the sake of Mark Antony's father, Cicero like basically paid off his debts and made sure that he wouldn't bring shame to his family name. But then he spent his entire career being a general and, you know, backing off the backs of great men. And when Caesar defeated Pompey, I don't know how you say it, when he defeated Pompey, Mark Antony got all of his wealth, all of his land, and blew all of it within like a matter of weeks. And it took Pompey his entire life to build up such a great fortune, and Mark Antony just gets rid of it. And he basically says that like Mark Antony will be the death of Rome. And let's just say Mark Antony didn't like this, and Mark Antony was like, "All right, if you find Cicero, like chop his head off." The soldiers find him. Cicero goes, "What you're doing is dishonorable, but do it with honor." And that's such a mic drop. Like, yeah, he's such a cool guy. But yeah, I don't think like a 10-minute video is gonna go into all that though. They're just gonna talk about oh his importance, oh this, oh that. So I'll end it here because I don't think it's gonna get better than that. You have really good knowledge about the past. Where did you learn this from? I just read philosophy. Okay, well, I don't really know much about history. I know a lot about individuals. So like obviously I've studied Roman history, but like to read Cicero, to understand Cicero, you have to understand the historical context because otherwise it doesn't make sense all the things he was doing, or you don't understand the importance of the letter to Mark Antony if you don't know the background behind it. So that's really where you get the history from. Same thing with Seneca, same thing with Marcus Aurelius. Like all of those books will have introductions where they teach you about these things. But I don't read history at all. I don't think history is interesting. I think it's just, oh, this happened on this date. Oh, this happened on this date. Like sure there's some events like the Civil War, but like you'll never see me being like a 50-year-old white guy that just watches history documentaries all night. Like that won't be me. It's just not interesting to me. I'm interested in ideas, so oh, I forgot your page is Bino Booker. Yeah, I mean, what do you expect, dude? But yeah, I'm gonna stream again tomorrow. I just got some stuff I gotta do. I have like something I gotta like a paper I finish, and I've been like exhausted today, so I want to unwind. I love Roman history, but in my country they've changed the whole syllabus now, dude. The thing about history is you gotta the interesting things you'll never be taught in school. You'll never be taught that Mark Antony was a prostitute when he was younger. You'll never learn that. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if that's that interesting, but it adds to the story being funny. And like, who would have known Cicero, a guy that's mentioned in passing, was such a significant figure? You know what I mean? Like, we learn about Alexander the Great, but we don't learn about everything he did. We don't learn about how he kept his kingdom. Like, if you want to learn some interesting shit about Alexander the Great, read Machiavelli's The Prince, because he in some regards says that Alexander the Great was one of the greatest rulers in terms of preserving the state. Like that's some of the most interesting stuff. And he points to Alexander as one of the greatest examples of keeping good counsel. Like that's where you learn the interesting details. I mean, Robert Greene also has some interesting historical things as well, because in all of his books he uses historical examples, but he talks about the motivations of the people. So like he'll talk about Caesar and say why Caesar did certain things. He'll talk about characteristics and how these led to their downfalls. Like I don't give a fuck about all these battles. I care about the people. I care about why Napoleon was the way he was. What made Napoleon a great general? What made Napoleon a great general was that he set up a chain of command so that he could communicate to basically 20 soldiers at a time, and then they could communicate all the way back up. So that mobility and that communication allowed him to be much less rigid than the Prussians at the time. The Prussians were like, let's study this battle, let's study every detail and do everything to a T. Whereas Napoleon was more flexible, more adaptable. And that's why he was able to reign supreme. And that's ultimately what led to his downfall because he became reliant on cannons, he became reliant on artillery. And that's ultimately what made him get defeated. You really see his decline in this um, Spanish conquest. That's when he loses for the first time, and then he goes into Russia, and it basically was the beginning of the end. But yeah, glad I had teachers who didn't teach us from books only. Dude, those are the best types of teachers. Those are the teachers that get it though. Teaching straight from a textbook is perhaps the worst way to learn information because, dude, I don't know about you, but whoever writes these textbooks have no ability to tell a story, have no ability to parse out the important details. The important details about history are not the dates. It's the civilizations, it's the cultures, it's the things that persist, the things that they learn that we still use today. You know what I mean? Like when the fuck was Mesopotamia? All I know about them is that they invented the wheel or rediscovered it, depending on who you ask. Like, you know what I mean? It's the stuff like that that I care about. I don't give a fuck about exact dates. I don't give a fuck about the wars. Like just knowing like the broad details and knowing the motivations and really seeing that human nature hasn't changed, really seeing the aspects of humanity that are still present, even though we think we're above war, even though we think we're above the brutality of the past. It's very stupid, but yeah, thanks for being here, Kenny. Thanks for having a good conversation. I'm gonna end this now. I'm getting tired. I'm starting to lose my voice. But yeah, I'm probably gonna stream. Actually, I'm not gonna probably stream again tomorrow. I will stream again tomorrow. I don't know why I said probably. So probably around the same time as well. So if I see you then, if I don't see you then, I'll see you at some point. Good having you here, man, and have a good rest of your night. Peace out.